You're going to hear a moment tonight that will be President Biden's bin Laden moment, because he will give a speech, we're told, that deals with the fight against terrorism that has been ongoing. This is a huge, huge win for the U.S.
Yeah. There's nothing unusual or extraordinary about referencing the policy reality you just heard there, that taking out an Qaeda leader and 9/11 plotter is a win for U.S. foreign policy. Full stop. A win for the U.S., not a political thing. Indeed, for all the differences over American policy in the Mideast, from 2 wars to how to stay or leave Afghanistan, every president from Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden agrees on the goal, the policy objective of killing bin Laden's successor, al-Zawahiri. So if you read news online or you watch a news show like this one or NBC Nightly News, you would just hear that fact. But it is the kind of point that is just often obscured, censored, or denied on Fox, especially since 2016, when that network aligned with Donald Trump after an initial revolt. And it's noticeable now amidst signs that Murdoch is pushing the channel back in the other direction, trying to skip coverage of Trump's speeches, promoting Ron DeSantis, featuring coverage of insurrection evidence, all part of an emerging split. Now, none of this is monolithic, and that was apparent in this big story I'm mentioning and how it was covered last night for so many Americans and conservatives who watch Fox. You have the headline there: Trump allies like Hannity say the killing of a 9/11 plotter, and that announcement and news cycle leads to their headline, "The world is less safe with Biden as president." Or the earlier point about that win that we showed you was clearly not the only nor the last word.
This is a huge, huge win for the U.S.
Biden gave a speech boasting that he's killed an al-Qaeda figure in Afghanistan. Great. Feel safer? Of course you don't.
The world is a much more dangerous place. ISIS, al-Qaeda, are surging in Afghanistan.
We turn now to a political strategist and veteran of several presidential campaigns, including the Obama campaign, Sheikh Komanduri. Welcome back.
It's good to be back, all right.
I don't know if you mind hearing Tucker, who sounded a little emotional, what some would call hysterical, saying he doesn't feel safer. So those are his feelings, which he's sharing with viewers as news. But that's his right. I'll defend his right to speak and emote. There's something wider going on here, though, and a breakthrough event like the killing of the 9/11 plotter is a feature of it, but we've covered it for days now. What do you see happening on Fox, and does it matter in Republican politics?
Oh, I think it very much matters. I think what you're seeing is Fox News appears to be not only at war with Donald Trump, but they also appear to be kind of at war with Tucker Carlson. And what I think is happening is Rupert Murdoch is basically placing a bet against his 2 biggest stars, Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson. And I would actually put that bet and put that money on Tucker Carlson. If you look at the history here, Tucker Carlson has been way ahead of the curve. You know, when Megyn Kelly and Fox News went out there in that first GOP debate and tried to sort of spear and kill Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson was an early adapter of MAGA. Tucker Carlson was way on the January 6th false flag misinformation bandwagon before others. He mainstreamed QAnon well before others. He went to Hungary and embraced Orban well before others. He has been predicting very accurately where the GOP was headed. And I think the reason is, unlike other Fox News celebrities, Sean Hannity, Sean Hannity does his show to please Trump. Tucker Carlson does his show to please the Trump voter. That's a big difference. So Sean Hannity can change if he wants to go from pleasing Donald Trump to pleasing Ron DeSantis. Tucker Carlson understands the MAGA base and understands what are the best long-term bets to place.
Really interesting points you're making, and they're clearly drawn from your analysis of the situation, just the same reason I think the Obama campaign used your services, rather than where we know you also separately stand, which is you've been a critic of Tucker Carlson, of his use of the racist replacement theory and other items. Since you mentioned that, and Murdoch sort of playing this three-dimensional chess, Carlson, of course, still defending Trump. He was actually, we checked, just at the Trump golf course this weekend. And so you have that sort of chumminess. But you also have Fox and Friends, where you can see on live air the awkwardness about reality or data that some Republicans don't want Trump to be the nominee and how that plays out.
55% of Republicans or people leaning Republican want somebody other than Donald Trump to run. That's up 6% from their earlier poll.
And if the former president's watching, you should know those are just the numbers you're relaying. You didn't come up with those numbers, right?
CNN came up with them.
Right.
Ainsley said that if this was a fascinating poll. It is. That's why we just talked about it.
And they are right as often as Haley's Comet comes by every 7 years.
So you're just saying all we talked about for the last 4 minutes is not accurate?
I'm just saying,
No,
if Donald Trump is watching, and if Donald Trump is watching, just let him know we didn't come up with that number. That's what the poll said.
Absolutely. I was talking to, yeah. I was talking to a pollster about these numbers, and they seem to be across the board regarding so few people on the Democratic Party want Joe to run.
It's just too soon to tell.
Well, I mean, what's interesting there is that Brian Kilmeade said, oh, the CNN poll is as accurate as Haley's Comet. Well, the Republican establishment historically has also been as accurate as Haley's Comet. If you want accuracy as to where the GOP is going, Tucker Carlson is a person, unfortunately, I think you should be listening to. He's the guy who really has his sort of finger on the pulse of the GOP. And keep in mind that this, breakup between Fox and Trump, they can get back together again. I mean, if you look at the tabloids, celebrity couples always get back together again. I'll admit I was very happy to see Affleck and J-Lo back together. I was really happy that those kids were able to work it out, but the Fox News Trump marriage, that can be put back together, and I don't think I'll be quite as happy to see that.
Understood, but you look at the Murdoch effort, and it is trying to use the way that modern media, which we all are living through, gives people an understanding of what the topic is. I mean, Trump's greatest strength in 2016 was not even necessarily what he was saying, although he did find messages that broke through and departed from some of the establishment party, but were his omnipresence. He now, of course, is in a situation where he has been deplatformed. That all is January 6th related, whether he comes back or not. Fox now isn't carrying his speeches. We pointed out they carried the January 6th hearings during the day live more than his recent speeches. He hasn't actually, even with his alliance with some of those hosts, he hasn't done an interview there in months. The New York Times pointed that out. And so at what point, Che, does the mediated nature of modern politics affect him? Or do you take the view as a campaign strategist that while that matters a ton on your way up, if you have 100% name saturation, it will matter less for a former president?
So I think that there's a big difference between Democrats and Republicans in the way they approach politics. Democrats look to the left to get policy ideas. So if you look at the recent Biden Manchin Schumer deal, they look to like Elizabeth Warren's ideas about corporate taxation or the Sunrise Movement's ideas about climate change to get their policy ideas. What happens on the Republican side is they look to the right to get their culture war ideas. Their policy ideas haven't really changed much over 50 years. It's tax cuts and right-wing judges. But where the culture war is moving, that's where they sort of go to figure out how do we convince white working class voters to vote for us. Donald Trump had an intuitive understanding, and Tucker Carlson had an intuitive understanding of where the culture war was going. Ron DeSantis, his understanding of that comes from polling, and you can clearly see it. And so I think from the point of view of the GOP, from Donald Trump and for Rupert Murdoch, you're better off going with the person who intuitively understands these things than the person who's faking, who's just using polling to sort of figure that out. And so what's going to happen is Fox News is going to realize this is where the GOP base is. This is where our viewers are. We need to go there. And the problem for them, and I think for the country, is Tucker Carlson already knows where they are. He's already there. And so that's where exactly they're going to end up heading.
Right, and it's very interesting because you're speaking about someone who, what him and Trump see eye to eye on is how to emotionalize everything. And that's why, as you say, it's not as much about policy. I'm running out of time now, but you brought up Ben Affleck. Do you have a favorite Ben Affleck film project?
Oh, I have many. I mean, I love Argo, the movie that he won the best picture for. I think that's a terrific movie. I think he's had multiple great performances in any number of movies. I think there's actually a recent movie called The Way Back, where he plays a basketball coach coming back into the game. That is actually a very good Ben Affleck performance. He's given multiple terrific performances, going back to Good Will Hunting all the way out to the more recent work. He's been a consistently terrific actor for 20 plus years. I think it's been kind of unfortunate some of the tabloid stuff with him has overshadowed what a good filmmaker and actor he has been.
And as for J-Lo, little trivia you may or may not know, you usually know all the trivia. J-Lo is one of the only people in world history to have a box office film debut at #1 the same week as an album. And the film was, do you know?
So I believe it was it Out of Sight?
Made in America.
98? Oh, it was Made in America. That's interesting. So 2001 or 2002 with Ray Fiennes, where she was
with Ray Fiennes. Wow. Yeah, and by the way, she's fantastic in that. I mean, she's so multi-talented, but she's fantastic in that film. Should we just forget the news and just do this the rest of the hour, Che?
Yeah, well, Made in America is actually an interesting movie. We can do a deep dive on that because, what's interesting is Ray Fiennes, Republican senator, and at the time, it was seen as part of the Karl Rove George Bush attempt to get the Latino vote. That they were playing he was a Republican senator and he has a romance with J-Lo, obviously a Hispanic maid, and there was a whole political analysis of it, but it's actually a rather charming romantic comedy if you just put the politics aside. And,
putting the politics aside is something we almost never do around here. But I do remember that movie fondly. Shout out to them and your area edition and the analysis. Jay, good to see you.
Good to see you.
All right, we have a lot more coming up, and it's not about